Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this joint presentation by Eurostat, the Statistical Office of the European Union, and DG Employment, that is the Directorate-General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion. And this morning we're going to be talking about the new social scoreboard of indicators linked to the European Pillar of Social Rights. Before we start with the presentations, I'd just like to say that we're collecting questions through Slido, and you should see either a link or a QR code depending on the route you're following to watch this streaming. We encourage you to use your smartphone or smart device to scan the QR code or to follow the link, and you can pose your questions through Slido, and we'll make sure during the Q&A session that they're passed on to the appropriate participant to answer. So, without further ado, I'd like to start by introducing Christine Wirtz, who is Eurostat's Director for Social Statistics. Christine, over to you.
Thank you, Tim, for the floor. It's a pleasure for me to be here today to open this event on the indicator scoreboard for the European Pillar of Social Rights. We introduced today a new, or let's say more precisely, a renewed dissemination tool adapted to the evolution of the Union policies. It concerns, as you said, Tim, the scoreboard for the European Pillar of Social Rights that is available on the Eurostat website, and where you can find the most up-to-date figures for the headline indicators. The pillar itself, the policy context, and also the need for the indicators and target will be further explained by my colleague from DG Employment, Barbara Kaufman, who will speak after me. For Eurostat, from the statistical side, this scoreboard is an important output of our statistics. It is cross-cutting, meaning that the data from several statistical domains and from different important data sources are used to calculate these indicators, and including the two major data collections and person and households. The one dealing with the labor force and another one dealing with income and living conditions. The social scoreboard is also a good example of the trust and quality in European statistics. The data produced by the national statistical institutes and the indicators calculated by Eurostat follow the rules of quality and independence that are highly appreciated and recognized by our users. Eurostat and the European Statistical System, that is actually the national bodies in charge of producing statistics, try to be at the forefront of the policy developments. And the social scoreboard is a good example of what we are able to do in this European statistical system. In the past years, we have done substantial legal work and methodological work. We also have optimized processes, and this resulted in modernized statistical data collections on individual persons and households. These annual and sub-annual EU surveys provide us with a wealth of microdata that can be explored and from which new indicators can be derived to respond in a rather quick way to new policy needs. These data sources are the EU Labour Force Survey, the acronym LFS is actually used worldwide, and the Survey on Income and Living Conditions, EU SILC. And they allow us to provide annual and sub-annual indicators for monitoring purposes. But these two rich data sources also allow us to underpin the headline indicators with breakdowns for more in-depth analysis. And then we have also additional data sources which are less frequent, which allow to go much deeper into different aspects like health and education, to mention just two. And actually, the first monthly and quarterly indicators under this revamped LFS are being published this year, and actually today we have here the scoreboard. Tomorrow we will publish the first employment figures from the LFS under this new legal base. So I take the opportunity to announce that as well. But back to today, where we show you the scoreboard with the indicators. And this new list of indicators was endorsed about a month ago, but Barbara will have more on that. Let me conclude this introduction by thanking the many colleagues behind this work in DG Employment, but also my colleagues in Eurostat who take care of the micro data and of calculating the indicators. And thanks to the colleagues who work on the dashboard and ensuring the visibility of these indicators. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. And now Barbara Kaufman, who is the Director of Employment and Social Governance Analysis at DG Employment. Barbara, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks, Christine. I'm really happy to be part of this event, as this is the first day where the new revised scoreboard is presented. And I would like to take the opportunity to thank my colleagues at Eurostat for their work on this. I think we now have a very user-friendly tool here, and we very much appreciate that. And I think it makes it easier also for policymakers and journalists and academics to use it. Of course, also thanks to my colleagues in DG Employment who have been working on that. So in my intervention, I wanted to briefly give you the broader context, also started a few words about the pillar and the action plan, and then also present the new headline targets and the actions related to them, and then finally talk briefly about the scoreboard, but I know that there will be more detailed presentations afterwards. So as regards the pillar of social rights, I suppose you know it was proclaimed in 2017 in Gothenburg by the Commission, the Parliament and the European Council in the presence also of social partners. And this pillar sets out 20 key principles and rights essential for fair and well-functioning labor markets and welfare systems in the 21st century. And it makes it clearer to European citizens what to expect from Europe in the social sphere. And this pillar is structured around 3 chapters: equal opportunities and access to the labor market, fair working conditions, and social protection and inclusion. The aim of the pillar is to ensure social Europe in the face of big challenges linked to climate change, digitization, globalization, and demographic trends. And by the way, all this goes a bit too fast in terms of PowerPoint, and these challenges are now even more prominent in the light of the drastic changes linked to the COVID pandemic. If you want to see a little bit more our insights of what the COVID pandemic has brought to the employment social situation in Europe, I invite you to have a look at our last report that was published on the 6th of July, Employment and Social Developments in Europe. Now, European and national policymakers need to continue to make efforts to mitigate, on the one hand, the socio-economic impact, and then on the other hand, to prepare for the green and digital transition, as well as address the aging of our societies. And if you look at the latest Eurobarometer, then 90% of the citizens said that social Europe matters to them for their personal lives, and they want a stronger social Europe. So what I'm saying here is that this pillar that was, with its 20 principles, that was already proclaimed in 2017, is still very much our framework, our guiding light. And we have had through the years all sorts of actions, such as the Directive on Transparent and Predictable Working Conditions, or the Directive on Work-Life Balance, or a Council recommendation on access to social protection. Now, then, nevertheless, I have to say, to breathe new life into the pillar and reiterate our common vision for strong social Europe and make the pillar even more concrete, the Commission put forward in March an action plan for the implementation of the European Pillar of Social Rights. And this is now what we have on the table. And here, what I would like to highlight is that we have new headline targets to be achieved by 2030. We have, secondly, around 65 concrete actions at the EU level to implement these 20 principles that I've shown you earlier, so as to promote more and better jobs, equal opportunities and fair working conditions, and social protection and inclusion. And then also it presents this updated social scoreboard that will be used to monitor progress. Now, let me say a few words about these 3 headline targets for 2030. You know, of course, we had 2020 targets, and there was at some point a question, will we also have some sort of 2030 targets in the employment, social and skills field, or will it be mainly green and digital? And I have to say that we are quite pleased that, first of all, the Commission put forward as part of this action plan these 3 headline targets. 78% of people aged 20 to 64 in employment by 2030. And to support this target, we need to also make sure that people who are, let's say, underrepresented in the labor market will be more integrated in the labor market. This is why, for instance, this action plan also refers to halving the gender employment gap. It also talks about reducing the share of young people that are neither in employment nor in education or training from currently 12.5% to 9% by 2030. And it also talks about reducing the disability employment gap. Now, of course, I mentioned already that there are various actions, and in order to support actually these targets, we are also then having all sorts of actions, such as the Youth Employment Support Package, or the recent current Commission recommendation on effective active support to employment that tries to ease the transitions to new jobs in the green and digital economy. Or also, of course, you know that when it comes to the question of quality of jobs, because it's not only about quantity, then the Commission had put forward in October a proposal on a directive on adequate minimum wages, and it's also planning later this year an initiative to address the challenges faced by platform workers. Now, let me then come to the second headline target, and that concerns upskilling and reskilling, which is, of course, something that will need to be done throughout life course. And it will very much not only help people to find new jobs in this more rapidly changing economy, but it is also key to address the needs of companies, because, for instance, nowadays we hear that 70% of companies say that the shortage of skills is a stumbling block for investment and thus also for job creation. Now, the aim is here that at least 60% of adults should participate in training every year, but then also the idea is that when it comes to skills, that we also have a basic digital skills for at least 80% of those aged 16 to 74. So that is in a way accompanying target, while the 60% adults in training is the headline target. And we have, of course, a whole skills agenda that is being extended through that. Then finally, the last one is the fight against poverty and social exclusion. First of all, the target of minus 15 million by 2030 of people in poverty and social exclusion, but there's also a separate target that there should be at least 5 million out of poverty and social exclusion. And to support this, we have, for instance, the recently agreed child guarantee, which will be supported also by funding, which provides for education and school-based activities, for free access to early childhood education and care, healthy meal each school day, and access to adequate housing. And of course, this comes on top of the reinforced youth guarantee that was also adopted by the Council last year. And otherwise, there are, of course, areas in such as housing overburden or other access to essential services that play a role in this context. Now, let me then go to the next slide and say that the revised scoreboard is therefore for us a very useful tool then on top of the headline targets, and then next to it the actions. The social scoreboard will be a tool to let us take the temperature of the state of play of across member states, how the potential challenges are tackled with, and these are particularly let's say, normally reflected in our joint employment report that we put forward every November and then also discuss with member states so that it becomes really a joint report. And secondly, also in all the country reports. And what is now new in this adjusted scoreboard is, of course, that we have revised it in a way so that it better reflects all these pillar principles, because so far some of these pillar principles were not reflected, and now we have made a major step in the direction of reflecting by now 18 of the 20, and we will continue to work on that. We have, of course, made sure that it takes into account parsimony, availability, comparability, statistical robustness, and of course our colleagues of Eurostat have been very helpful in this context. Besides the headline indicators, there are also 31 secondary indicators also for those. We put a proposal in the action plan, but here we're still in discussion with member states. So let me then look a little bit at the scoreboard for a brief moment, because I'm sure it will be done in more detail later. So here I just wanted to focus for a moment on the ones that are new and just make the link with what I've been saying so far, because basically I've mentioned to you that we have this new target for adult participation in learning during the last 12 months. So this is for our adult learning indicator. And then similarly, I mentioned that we want to bring 5 million at least children out of the risk of poverty and social exclusion. That's why you find this new indicator there. I also mentioned that it's important that people with disabilities are better integrated in the labor market. Therefore, we now have this disability employment gap. And then finally, I mentioned that we are looking also at issues like housing cost overburden as part of the pillar principle on access to essential services. So from that point of view, I think this social scoreboard will serve our purposes better, both to reflect better the principles and also initiatives that we have been taking, or the Council has also endorsed. And this brings me now to the last slide, I think, because here I wanted to briefly tell you, yes, the Commission put on table this action plan with the targets, with the actions, with the scoreboard. And then we had the social summit in Porto on the 7th and the 8th. There we had already the declarations and the welcoming of the headline targets and of the revised scoreboard proposed in the action plan. This was then followed up by the June EBSCO Council, where ministers again endorsed also the changes to the headline indicators in the scoreboard. At that meeting, also Commissioner Schmidt invited member states to put forward by mid-September the headline targets, the national headline targets, and then finally a more formal, after the somewhat informal social summit in Porto, a more formal endorsement also of the outcome of the Porto statements was taking place on the 24th and 25th June European Council. So we now can use all these tools, and it will be extremely important also in our European semester work. And we believe that with this update, we are making a further step towards, a stronger social Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barb. And now we're going to move over, and I'm going to give the floor to Georgiana from Eurostat. And Georgiana will present an overview of the scoreboard itself, and then we'll actually go live to the scoreboard to demonstrate how to access and use it. So Georgiana, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you very much for the introduction to Barbara and also to Christine. I hope you can now see my screen, my presentation. Of course, I will focus more on the indicators side. You have heard so far what is the political reasoning behind having this social scoreboard. And I will focus on the changes from the indicator side on the scoreboard, and also changes to indicators themselves, or new indicators that Eurostat has collected in order to support the policy priorities of DG employment. You have already seen the pillar, the principles, the 20 principles, and the pillar is supported by the social scoreboard, which is a reference framework to monitor societal progress. Eurostat is the provider of the data for the majority of the indicators of the social scoreboard. There are only a few secondary indicators that are not coming from Eurostat. And we are using high quality sources, especially the European Labour Force Survey and the Income and Living Conditions Survey, EUSILC, to provide this data so that we can have valid comparisons between member states and to identify trends over time. You have seen these three main targets. I would like to speak about them from the side of the indicators. So the employment target is collected from the LFS, and it was also presented, it was part of the Europe 2020 agenda. It was a target also for 2020, now it's a target for 2030. There is continuity there, and it's coming from a high quality survey. The indicator on adults participating in education and training in the last 12 months is going to be collected also in the same high quality source, which is the EULFS, starting from 2022 and will be available in 2023. We have experience with collecting this indicator in the adult education survey, but this is a survey that is collected less frequently, every 5 years. That's why the reference data for this indicator is 2016. And the very important indicator on poverty. I would like to speak a little bit about this indicator because I'm not sure everybody's familiar with it. So it's people at risk of poverty or social exclusion. There are three components of these indicators, and in order to be considered at risk of poverty or social exclusion, the person has to be at least in one of these three categories. One is monetary poverty, so having an equivalized income of less than 60% of the median in the country, or to be in a situation of material or social deprivation. And this is important to underline that in order to adjust to the changes in the society, the definition of this indicator has been changed. There were 9 deprivation items, and they included items like having a personal computer or a TV, a color TV, a washing machine. But nowadays, almost everybody has them. So deprivation now is a bit different. Therefore, the revised deprivation indicator includes, for example, items like being able to go to socialize with friends or family at least once a month, or being able to spend a small amount of money on yourself every week, having an internet connection. So it's important to underline that this indicator has changed in order to be more adapted to the times. And the last component is being in a household with low work intensity, where the adults work less than the 20% of the time that they could dedicate to work. And here as well, there has been a change, because it used to refer to the population that was not yet 60, and now it has been changed to population not yet 65, also because of the changes in the world of work, of course. Yes. There are also supporting targets, and that's also important to see, because all these are reflected in the scoreboard of indicators. So there is an indicator on gender employment gap, one on early childhood education, rate of needs. All this is measured by indicators in the scoreboard. As Barbara already mentioned, the social scoreboard has been updated for the headline indicators. The secondary indicators are still the same as in 2017, as they are still under discussion. And another change to the scoreboard, if you have already looked at our website in the past, is that the structure has slightly changed. So there are no more areas in the three main domains. We have the three main domains, and for each of them, headline indicators and secondary indicators. Of course, we have updated all the relevant parts of the website to reflect these changes that were done at the political level. And of course, we also, when needed, produced new indicators, like is the case of the employment disability gap, the disability employment gap. And as I already mentioned, we changed the definition, for example, for the at risk of poverty or social exclusion. All this is done, of course, in order to respond to political and, of course, societal needs as well. These are the three domains, and these are the, so now I will present the three domains, which are equal opportunities, fair working conditions, and social inclusion. And these are the headline indicators for each domain. And I will discuss a little bit about the novelties. So in equal opportunities, there is this adult participation in learning during the last 12 months, which is a new indicator, and it will also be a new indicator added to the scoreboard, but it will also be a completely new indicator collected by Eurostat in the very high quality social survey that is the labor force survey. And it will be collected starting with 2022 and available in 2023. The other indicators, early school leavers, level of digital skills, and people not in education or employment, gender employment gap, and income quantile ratio were already in the previous version of the score. For fair working conditions, we have only these four headline indicators that have not changed. so employment, unemployment, long-term unemployment rates, and the increase in household adjustable household available income per capita. And regarding social protection and inclusion, there were more changes. So except this at risk of poverty or social inclusion indicator, something new is that also the three components are presented together with the overall indicator. So the at risk of poverty rate, the material or social deprivation rate, and people living in households with low work intensity. And we also present these indicators for children, so people below 18 years old. I would like to add, this is the general deprivation indicator. It's also has been adapted to children, so it can be calculated every year. It's children who live in a context of household deprivation. There are specific indicators on deprivation for children that are going to be collected every 3 years. So this will give even more information about poverty of children and also more information in order to better adapt policies to help children escape poverty. And there is the disability employment gap, which has been published for the first time just 2 weeks ago. It's based on the living conditions survey, but this is also an indicator that will be collected. So disability status will be collected also in the labor force survey, and therefore will be available from the labor force survey at a later stage in 2023. And all the other indicators that are there were already included in the 2017 version of the scoreboard. And I will discuss more in details during my next presentation about our dedicated section on the European Pillar of Social Rights. I have put here the link as well, and also at the end of the presentation. We have a visualization tool in which we can only include Eurostat indicators that already exist in Eurobase. And you can either select the EU as a whole or individual countries. And then from there you have a direct link to Eurobase. You have more information about the indicators in the form of a glossary entry, but also in the form of metadata. So you can have an exact definition of the indicator, the data source, the frequency with which it's collected, and so on, in the 3 working languages. There is also information about indicators, which is a complete overview of the scoreboard. So it also includes the 5 indicators that come from sources other than Eurostat, with links to glossary entries and main tables. So that is probably the most relevant part, because there you have all the data. For the data, you can select different breakdowns. There is a lot of information. And there is also a table added at the end for the indicators that come from other sources. So just talking a little bit about data sources, indicators, and breakdowns. The main sources are the labor force survey and the income and living conditions survey. They are yearly social surveys. So in general, that means most breakdowns required are possible. It also depends a bit, sometimes there are data limitations, but in general, you can have the same information for different age groups, for males and females, for people born in the EU or born outside of the EU, for people with limitations in activity or not, for people living in urban or rural areas, for people living in different regions. It always depends on the sample size that we have for different categories. So not always all breakdowns are possible for all indicators, but in general, most are. This excludes, of course, some aggregated indicators that are ratios. And I already said that, yes, the adult learning will be collected only starting with 2022, and that we implemented new definitions for ROP and 2 of its components. And that the disability employment gap, for that, the data source will change from EUC to EULFS in 2023, which will probably represent an important breaking series. We are working to document all the changes as good as possible, and also to provide the highest quality possible for all the indicators. This is Eurostat's mission. So this is the end of the first part of my presentation. Then I will show you exactly the website. And in case you have more questions, you can contact me or the Eurostat user support. Now I will go to the second part of my presentation, which is showing you the website. So this is the website. It has an overview page. It presents this visualization tool that I was talking about. Here you have the indicators. You can open directly from here data sources. This is, for example, the indicator on early leavers. There is an info button. So here you have information about the indicator. And also for some indicators, this comes also in the form of a metadata file. So here as well, you have definition of the indicator, the population, it refers to frequency and timeliness of dissemination, a lot of information. There is also a trend graph with the data. That normally can be clicked on, but no, yes, it was just So you can see the trend for the indicator. And you can also select the country, not just the EU as a whole. So I select Luxembourg because it's the country I live in. And we can see, for example, that income inequality in Luxembourg has increased. So this is a very nice tool. You can come back to the overview page. You can also have this overview table I was talking about. And here we can take the same example of early leavers from education and training. There is the glossary entry. And here we can also add indicators that do not come from Eurostat. So for example, underachievement in education, which comes from PISA, which is a survey collected by the OECD. And you can click on the link here and go directly to their page. Then we can come back to the overview page, where there is, of course, also a short introduction. And we go to the main tables. Here you have all the data, which is the most relevant part. And we also have the data by degree of by NUTS2 region. So these are other tables with information at regional level. And there is also a methodology link and the policy context link. And that's on the website, and I hope you will enjoy clicking on the different parts of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgiana. Right. Now we have a chance for some questions to the panel. As I said, we are collecting the questions through Slido. We have already seen that some questions have arrived. So, Anna Maria, what do we have a first question? Okay, let's start with the first question. Currently, the social scoreboard does not capture homelessness, which is a priority of the action plan of the Pillar of Social Rights. Has Eurostat plans to address this data gap? Perhaps, Christine, this is for you, I suspect.
Well, yes, this is really a difficult topic. We have spoken that our main data sources are social surveys, where we try to reach people who have a fixed place where we can reach them and speak to them. So, and this is difficult with homelessness. Nevertheless, we have tried to capture aspects of homelessness in the SILK survey, so in the survey of income and living condition, and have tested it a couple of years ago. And so it looks more at housing difficulties. Can have people experience difficulties, or is there a risk of experiencing difficulties? And yeah, so we will have we had a test a few years ago, and we will have it as a module in 2023 in EU SILK. Again, these kind of questions, and hope to have useful information thereafter. But in general, the issue of homelessness is something also which we try to look at constantly to find possible new solution. But the first answer is yes, in EU SILK we look at the phenomenon.
Thank you, Christine. We have a question. We have a question here. You talk about the 2030 targets for the EU and member states. Do all the member states now have to reach these headline targets? What if some are already close? So I think this one perhaps is for Barbara.
Okay. Thank you very much. Maybe I could first also say that I mean the Commission really pays a high attention to homelessness, and at the end of June we launched a platform to combat homelessness. There was also an event in Portugal, still under Portuguese presidency. So, I mean, I do not disagree at all that this is still something where we have to work further on as far as the indicator is concerned. But, I mean, it is a high political priority. Now, as regards the question on the targets, I already mentioned earlier that Commissioner Schmidt invited member states in the June EBSCO Council to set national targets. He's also either he has sent a letter already to ministers or is about to do so. And basically the point is that national target setting is very much in the competence of member states. So we do not, when we talk about these targets, these are EU level targets, and there needs to be joint action to reach them, but not every member state has to reach exactly these numbers. It's you know, a joint effort to come to this average, and basically our idea is that member states that are further behind should do an extra push, an extra effort, so a little bit more. But the idea is not that those that are close to the EU level target or even above shouldn't do anything. Everybody has to strive for more. And of course, employment, more jobs, you know, more skills and fighting poverty must be a common objective, so everybody has to do their part. Now we on our side, we're trying to provide some guidance, so we had already discussions also with the Employment Committee and Social Protection Committee, how this could roughly work. If member states were doing this and this, then it could roughly add up. What we are planning to do after we get some first initial, you know, indications from member states, we will try to see, follow up with bilateral discussions with member states, then also have discussions in EMCO and social protection committees, with the aim that by the end of next year we have national targets that could hopefully added up amount to the EU level targets. So.
Thank you. Next question. Is the COVID-19 pandemic addressed in the scoreboard, or sort of a follow-up to that? Does Eurostat have data on the impact of COVID? I think Georgiana, perhaps you can answer this one.
I will also say.
Yes, of course. We have stepped up our efforts to collect data on this, and the indicators in the scoreboard are annual, but you can find sub-annual data on the impact of COVID-19 and the recovery from the pandemic in the European Statistical Recovery Dashboard. And a summary of the most interesting findings is included in our recently published SDG monitoring report. So we have data on excess mortality and how the employment and unemployment rates have evolved, and also we have data on monthly data on short-term working schemes. So how many people or how many jobs are on short-term working schemes in the different member states.
Thank you. And I think Barbara also
Yes.
had that.
Yeah, because what I wanted to say is that let's say the old scoreboard, for instance, is also now reflected in the staff working documents for each member state on the recovery and resilience plans. So that's where you might find a recent reflection of what the crisis may have done. Of course, we also know that some of the indicators, let's say Europa, for instance, comes with a delay, so you cannot yet see all the impact that you will have from the COVID crisis on the at risk of poverty and social exclusion rate. But what I wanted to mention is that earlier I said that we have published on the 6th of July the Employment and Social Developments in Europe report. And in this report, which is a lot about the impact of COVID, on a more EU level, we also did some simulations on the one hand, and also used the Eurostat flash indicator to show that thanks to the many measures that have been adopted, not only could the increase in employment at the EU average be contained to like 1%. For young people, unfortunately, it's an increase by 2 percentage points, but also that it looks like inequality may not have risen last year, which you could have otherwise expected, but due to these many support measures. At the same time, the report also shows that if you go into specific occupational groups and you go into different population groups, you will see that some people had more problems than others due to COVID. So I think it's an interesting report, and we could share the link. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then we have another question. Could you please give us further information, insights on how the Commission is using the scoreboard indicators in designing its social policies? So I think that one is for Barbara.
Yes, I would say, first of all, you saw the pillar principles, and currently what we have been doing quite a lot is we looked at what kind of initiatives did we already have and which ones were still missing. And from that point of view, in this context, when we then put forward an initiative because we say in this area we did not yet cover, let's say, I mentioned the youth employment package, support package, the YES package that was put on the table last July. We, for instance, use then the share of young who is neither in employment, training or education. We say, it is 12.6, and we then say, okay, there seems to be on the one hand the high unemployment rate, on the other hand this problem, and we need to do something. So these indicators help. We then also, as I mentioned, set a target, like in this case by 2030 we want to have 9%, and then we use also the scoreboard, especially in terms of following up whether the initiatives work as intended. On the other hand, I would also say they are particularly important at the national level, because as mentioned, now this year it's the reports on the recovery and resilience plans, but otherwise in the semester context we have these annual country reports, and it is very helpful at the national level to see where a country has specific problems and where therefore we need to focus our country-specific recommendations, and then where member states need to focus their efforts and where they should put the money, like the ESF and the Recovery and Resilience Fund should go where the challenges lie. So I think it's not only at the EU level, but especially also at the national level where the scoreboard guides the efforts and the funding.
Thank you, Barbara. We now have a more statistical question that I suspect Georgiana can start with an answer. Since trend charts are shown, is there any intention to publish confidence intervals for the figures to show if changes over time are statistically significant? So Georgiana, confidence intervals?
Thank you for this challenging question, Tim. I think we did publish confidence intervals for regional data at some point because they were requested. we are doing a lot of work to estimate these confidence intervals and to ensure that our figures are very robust. And information about it can be found, for example, in quality reports. And we do not publish data, or we publish it with an unreliable flag if the sample size is too small. So I think in this moment we do not have really plans to publish the confidence intervals for the figures in the pillar. But this is always an option that we can discuss if the need arises.
Thank you. And perhaps Christine, what do you think about the perhaps a future giving more information on confidence level intervals and other underlying quality that people can use to assess the figures?
Okay, well, if we look at scoreboards here, so today we are speaking about the scoreboard, and which is intended for the general public without, we always publish metadata with the data. However, I think the public is really looking for point estimates, and that's what we are showing in our publications, in our scoreboards, and it's not only in the social scoreboard, it's also in our databases, and indeed the reliability of statistics, the confidence intervals are very important pieces of information, but as Georgiana rightly said, they are in quality reports where we and in the metadata where the quality of statistics is explained, and we use flags. But having said that, Barbara already referred to the flash estimate on the income inequalities, which is more statistics of experimental nature still. To some extent here we are publishing intervals, but actually the users are very much using for point estimates. But of course, for expert users, we also make available microdata, and for all users should be aware about the confidence interval about data, and that everything has to be taken still with some degree of reliability, which is not always 100% precision. But in general, the line is we publish the point estimates on our websites and in the databases.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one final question before we have to wrap up. And this is a question on a target. So for the target for the indicator on NEETs, was the recent change that those on parental leave with a job to return to count as employed taken into account? I think that possibly lies between Christine and Barbara. I'm not sure.
Well, it's about, as it concerns the data, actually, yes, that is one important change in the labor force survey, which is now under the YES regulation. And we now calculate the indicator with the new definition, and countries will create break-free time series, which they will transmit to us. And here the deadline is by the end of this year, where all the countries provide us such break-free time series, and we will look at the impact over when this data is available early next year.
Okay,
but currently the new definition is used for the calculation.
Okay, thank you. We've come more or less precisely to the end of our allotted time. So I'd just like to say thank you to all our presenters. Thank you to those listening and asking questions. And I'd like to say one final thing. We are not only using Slido to collect the questions, we will also be using Slido with a short survey on the event, and your feedback is important to us because it will help us design new events, future events, and we know what changes we need to make and the way we need to organise these to be as helpful as possible to you. So with that said, please stay around in Slido and complete the survey. It's only a short survey. Thank you very much to all our participants, and I hope to see you again at a future webinar. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.